politicians are very worried about that, right? They don't want to be the one talking about Bitcoin. And it takes a lot of guts to do so.
Samson Mow explores whether Bitcoin could explode to $500,000 overnight, and if zero point 0.1 BTC is enough to retire. Let's watch and find out how close financial freedom might really be.
A Veblen effect is just taking that and extrapolating that concept and applying it to Bitcoin, whereby there is like a threshold at which Bitcoin crosses this, and now it is like the new gold. And I think we're already seeing an inkling of that with the executive order to create the SBR. But in terms of price, I would say that threshold is probably somewhere at, I don't know, maybe 500,000 per Bitcoin, maybe 400,000 Bitcoin. Somewhere there is where we start becoming the second largest asset class on the planet. And people can kind of directly compare gold at the top with, 20 trillion, and Bitcoin with, half of that. And I think at that point you start to demonetize gold because, you have this new thing that is surpassing that 1,000-year monetary technology in 16, 17, 18 years. So that's when you start to shift and think, okay, I need exposure to this. I'm willing to dump my gold and buy some of this. And maybe gold is the only valuable thing a lot of people have left after the dollar starts to hyperinflate or devalue even more. Because you have to imagine at that threshold, like, what does the world look like when Bitcoin is $500,000? It's a very different world than today, right? It's not 80, 90, 100, 108. It's a very radically different world. And I think people miss that mindset that things change as Bitcoin goes up in big chunks. Like 200, it's a very different world. From 200, 500, you just have to, double plus a little bit, right? And then from 500 to a million, it's just a double. So these things become more likely the higher we go, because it's not like we're 10xing, we're just doubling from 500 at that Veblen threshold.
Bitcoin is hovering around $95,000 to start the week after a nearly 3% weekend dip, and investors are eyeing both politics and on-chain data for clues on what's next. President Donald Trump has acknowledged the risk of a recession, but hinted at announcing at least one new trade deal soon. While this could boost markets in the short term, the uncertainty around tariffs and economic policy is creating a cautious atmosphere. Legendary investor Warren Buffett added fuel to the debate by criticizing Trump's trade tactics, warning that trade should not be a weapon. This uncertainty is pushing investors towards safer assets, which doesn't favor Bitcoin right now. On-chain data from Sandiment shows a spike in profit-taking, putting extra pressure on price. The network realized profits/loss indicator suggests holders are locking in gains, increasing sell-side volume. Still, institutional demand remains strong, with $1.81 billion flowing into U.S. Bitcoin ETF last week. Technically, Bitcoin is showing signs of a short-term pullback. Bearish divergence on the RSI and weakening momentum on the MACD suggest a potential move down to $92,580 or even $90,000. But if bulls can regain control and push BTC above $97,700, the door could open for a run toward the key $100,000 level. For now, markets remain on edge.
Yeah, so the Omega candle is a 100K candle, and a God candle, or also called a Godzilla candle, is a 10K candle. But the Omega candle, it should be green, but it might be red. Like one of the first God candles, I think, was a red God candle, like 10K down. But it just goes to show that the Bitcoin price movements are becoming bigger and bigger, and people are not always aware of these movements. But I still see people like poking at me and saying, "Hey, where's your God candle that you've been talking about?" And my reaction is like, go look at the chart. There have been like 8 or 9 of them so far. But people aren't really aware. And they're not going to be aware of the Omega candle too. Maybe they will, who knows. But like the indication is that if we're seeing God candles regularly, 10K daily movements, it's probably going to bring us to a 100K daily movement relatively soon. And 100K is just, 10x. Bitcoin has done 17x in the past with a totally different macroeconomic landscape than today. Like zero Bitcoin national adoption, no strategic Bitcoin reserves, no talk about issuing Bitcoin bonds, and no talk about buying 1 million Bitcoin from the US. So it's completely within the realm of possibility that you get a 100K candle soon, maybe this year. So I think that the biggest thing is the Omega candle is saying be ready for this when it happens, because things are changing very, very rapidly. This is a really big game changer. There are a lot of voices out there on Twitter or X saying, it's just an executive order. They're not going to buy. It's just moving seized funds and not selling. But I think they're missing the bigger picture, that it is a seismic shift in the perception of Bitcoin. And I think Adam Back said it the best, that it is a major shift of the Overton window. If not, it's like a destruction of the Overton window, that Bitcoin is legitimate now, not just as an investment asset, but as a reserve asset, and something that government should have because it is of the utmost strategic importance. The ETFs, I would say, shifted that already and made it a legit asset class. You can't have BlackRock coming into the picture, the largest asset manager on the planet, launching a Bitcoin ETF that is their most successful ETF to date, and one of their biggest now, and not understand that that has changed something. But this has changed everything, because we haven't yet seen that nation state race to accumulate Bitcoin, right? You've had a few small countries buying, El Salvador buying, and Bhutan mining, but that hasn't really triggered a race, because they're just not big enough, right? Everyone looks to the US for guidance on everything and where things are going. And that was the same case for the ETFs, that like the Hong Kong and Australian ones didn't launch until the SEC cleared it in the US, and then they went. It's the same thing for this. Like, you have to have the signal from a major world power that Bitcoin is important to them before everything else trickles downstream and people really start to follow significantly. But I think this EO is that step. And then now we have Cynthia Lummis's Bitcoin bill that will actively implement buying in addition to the reserves they have that are held. But the rate at which things are developing is just so much faster. Like, you had a few U.S. senators posting pictures of themselves with laser eyes yesterday, and one of the dogs has laser eyes too. Like, I didn't see that coming, but maybe we're going to start seeing even more, but I'm here for it.
Today is a big day for Bitcoin policy in the U.S., as the Treasury Department faces a major deadline. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent must deliver a long-anticipated report detailing how the government plans to build and manage a national strategic Bitcoin reserve. This move follows President Trump's executive order from March 6, which called for the creation of a reserve funded entirely by Bitcoin seized through legal actions, such as criminal forfeitures. The idea behind the reserve is to hold these assets, not sell them, and treat them as long-term financial resources for the country. Alongside the Bitcoin reserve, the order also introduced the concept of a broader digital asset stockpile that includes other cryptocurrencies acquired through similar legal channels. The goal is for this initiative to remain budget neutral and not place any burden on taxpayers. Secretary Bessent's report is expected to address how these assets should be stored, managed, and possibly expanded, as well as any legislative or regulatory changes required. The decisions made today could shape the U.S. government's role in the crypto space for years to come. If the plan moves forward, the U.S. could become the first major country to treat Bitcoin as a core strategic asset, rather than just a speculative tool. That's all for today's video. Until next time.